when kids are having a bad day, or when a student is crying, or something's going on at home, when Tucker or Blue come lay with them, it's one of those things where you see it and you don't really understand it, and then you look at the child and they're petting the dog, and pretty soon that's all they're thinking about is the dog. And it's just amazing to see. Even if a kid just walks by and hey, Tucker, gives him a little pet on the head, or hey, give me a high five, Tucker. Those are little things that you know that they're just engaged with the dog, and they're engaged with what's going on in the school, and you're helping them by just having that dog there. And those are the 1,000 little things you see over and over.
I'm Nikki Herda, and this is Bright, stories of hope and innovation in Michigan classrooms, a podcast where we celebrate our state's educators and explore the future of learning. Bright is brought to you in part by MEMIC Insurance Company, insuring the educational community for more than 70 years. Teachers and school employees visit memic.com/quote to see how much you can save. In today's episode of Bright, I chat with Joel Asiala, principal of Washington Middle School in Michigan's northernmost school district, the Public Schools of Calumet, Laurium, and Keweenaw, better known as CLK. Our research team actually recently visited CLK and wrote an in-depth report on their many student-centered learning initiatives in February 2022. You can see the results of this fascinating study at michiganvirtual.org/research. In the following conversation, Joel breaks down his district's student-first approach, shares how and why he had his family pet Tucker trained as a professional therapy dog, and offers his top 3 tips for starting a therapy dog program at your school. Well, Joel, thank you so much for joining me for the Bright podcast today. It's a pleasure to have you. Would you be able to tell me about the most interesting project that you're working on at your school right now?
We have several things going on, but our student first approach, that's our biggest overtake or undertaking, I guess, from when I started. I just started here during the summer. So I'm a couple months into this. I was at Horizons for an alternative school for 5 years. So we're taking some of the things that we learned in the alternative school and we're transferring over to the mainstream. So the biggest things we're bringing in this year right now, we're working on bringing a food pantry right into the school, so kids have access to food at any time they want during the day, and then they also can take it home and the families can use it. So having that is a big undertaking, and that's finally up and running, and we're working on maker spaces. So that's a big part of what we're doing, and the maker spaces are going to allow students, when they're done with class, to be able to go and hang out and work with laser engravers and Cricut machines and robots, and we got a $56,000 donation to do that. So that's been really good. And then our flex labs are 25 minutes on both sides of lunch, where students will be able to have access to, it's like a guided study, I guess. Students will have access to all their teachers, will be able to flow to any classroom they want to go to get the help they need. And then when they're all caught up and have all their homework done and they understand, or the tests or quizzes or whatever, they can then go into those maker spaces and try something new and create something and take what they learned in class and apply it to the hands-on project-based education type stuff. So we have a lot going on.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah, I think my teachers are probably thinking I'm a little crazy at times, but they've really jumped on board, and we've done some really cool things. So lots of different things going on all at once.
So you said you brought a lot of those projects. Those were things that you kind of piloted or tried out at your alternative school that you were at. That's Horizons, right?
Yeah.
For several years.
Correct. So Horizons Alternative High School is Calumet. I'm part of the same district. It's our alternative school up north. I say up north because it's the furthest high school in Michigan. So we worked there, or I worked there for 5 years. I learned a lot and saw what helped out kids that struggled. And so we took what we learned there and we're going to apply it to a middle school model and see if we can't bring some of those ideas here to help some of those students before they get to that stage where they kind of want to quit or give up.
Do you believe that a lot of the things that are found to be effective in alternative settings can also benefit and have a big impact on, non-alternative schools?
Yeah, I think that, I truly believe that if you can figure out how to work in the alternative setting and see success, if you bring that to the mainstream, you're going to be extremely successful, right? And these are some of the students that struggle the most in your regular ed classes, as they call them here. But they're just classes, they're kids. No matter where you're at, kids are kids, and so if you can figure out how to reach a population that struggle the most, that's only going to enhance your ability to reach the kids that are doing at the top, middle, and at the bottom. So yeah, I really do believe that the stuff I've learned there is going to be very helpful to bring it here and grow this program here as well.
That makes a lot of sense to me, actually. I had never thought about it, like through that lens before. But, even if I think about like, myself, I was always motivated to do my homework and everything. But there is a difference between being engaged and, like really having that student first and that passion and that alignment.
And that's the biggest thing right there, is that passion. That passion is I think the biggest thing in schools is getting students to realize that they're passionate about something, because it's a lot. It's not no longer work even. I mean, I don't come to work every day. I have a great career, right? Because I found something I was passionate about. If you can find those passions in students at an earlier age, a middle school age or an elementary age, it's so much easier to approach them students, get them students to work, because they're working for something they like to do. It's so easy, but so hard at the same time. And so that's what we've learned at the alternative school is, you can do your social studies, you can do your science, you can do your math, you can do everything you want to do. But if a kid doesn't have passion behind it, they're not going to go and do their best. And so we allow them students at Horizons, we allow those students, once you're done your social studies, you can go work in the makerspace, or you can go work on your math or your science, or we had a gaming room, actually. We had esports that we brought into Horizon. Cool. Yeah, so we had a lot of success with that. And now the person that took over after me, so I worked with a student that I couldn't figure out how to get that student to school, and I worked really hard and tried everything I could. And I told the guy that took over, Darren Kinnanen, for me, I'm like, man, he's a great kid, but we just got to figure it out. Darren Kinnanen, talked to him. What are you passionate about? What do you love? He said, I love my motorbike, but my motorbike doesn't work anymore. Darren said, I got it. You come into my school, bring your engine in here. I'll buy all the tools for you. If you're here every day, you get your work done, you can work on your motorbike. The kid hasn't missed a single day, and he's passing school. So what does that tell you, right? You find something they're passionate about, lock in, hone into it, and it's amazing stuff. And that's what we're trying to do here, is find those passions. And we talked a little bit about the student first approach, and I know this is going to be about Tucker and our therapy dog, and that student first approach is wrapped around this, finding out what kids are passionate about, but also finding out when they're struggling, what can you do to pull them back on track. And Tucker has been a huge part of that, and that's our therapy dog. And I wish I had him here. But the good, the bad, and the ugly with therapy dogs is you can't always bring him to school. I have stuff after school I have to go, so I don't get to introduce you to him. But he was a huge part of Horizons, and has been a big part here. Actually, we piloted the therapy dog program up at Horizons, and I brought him to the main campus at, I think, about 3 years ago. And Darren Kinnanen was a social worker at that point in time. And when I brought Tucker in, and I brought him into a big room of kids, Tucker immediately went to the back of the class, and there was a kid sitting there. And Tucker sat down and put his head on this kid's lap. And Darren's like, what's your dog doing? I said, just sit back and watch. And pretty soon this kid, the student that was upset and angry and didn't want to be there, is petting Tucker. And then pretty soon Tucker puts his paw up, because that's what he does. He puts his paw on, the kid's lap. Anytime you quit petting him, he puts his paw up there. He wants attention. And after 8-10 minutes, the kid was smiling, talking. And I called Tucker over to me, and the student actually followed the dog. And so that's when our social worker said, this is absolutely amazing. We need to get this in our regular school. And I use that term regular lightly. We need to get it in our regular schools. And that's where it started. That's where our therapy dogs in this area started, is that little instance in the main campus. And now we have Blue in our main campus. He's our middle school dog. And now since I moved to main campus, we have 2 therapy dogs. Well, actually 3. We have Bailey, who's a little tiny dog, but she's in training. She has potty break issues every once in a while. So that's a bad thing, right? You have to put up with animal behaviors here and there. But that's how we kind of started. And then our elementary school got 2 dogs as well. So they bring 2 dogs in. And now it's actually, we have a couple schools in our area that got therapy dogs after hearing some of the success stories. So I know it's a lot.
No, it's amazing. I can see, just at face value, how those things connect to capturing kids' hearts, right? As you said, in that student first approach. Food pantry, probably because people need to eat,
Yeah. Well, you'd be amazed. I think everybody would be amazed if you just jumped in your car. If you're a principal or a teacher, jump in your car and drive around your district. Drive around your district and see, kind of take it in and see what's going on. And you're going to start to see some things that you I don't think you understood when you took a job, right? You drive around and you see that there are kids struggling, there are families struggling. And those students need as much help as we can give them. And that's where we started with the alternative school. It didn't start with me until first of all, I started there, and I try to be very strict, and that's my background, is kind of strict disciplinarian. And a teacher came up to me after about 4 or 5 months. Her name's Meg North, and said, "Hey, what you're doing is not working. It's just not. These kids are used to someone yelling at them. They're used to someone, telling them, giving all the rules, and that hasn't worked." So I changed my approach, and it really helped. And then I ended up bringing a student home one day, and I kind of saw what they were dealing with, and that's when we started going down all these other different routes, just to try to realize that. I mean, if you look at any philosopher, Maslow or Piaget, or anybody that you learn about in education from back in the day, you'll see that making sure they're fed, making sure that they feel safe, making sure they feel understood, maybe even go as far as feeling loved or accepted. Maybe if you can get those things down, the teaching is the easiest part. That's the easiest part. Getting the information is the easiest part, if you have those other things in place. And I'm lucky I have Mr. Davidson. He's my boss, that kind of allows me to do what I think is best. And then we have great people like Vern Hazard from Capturing Kids' Hearts, or Kevin Storr from the Porch Health Foundation, who gave us the grants to do Capturing Kids' Hearts, or Laurel Mackey, who works with 31 Backpacks. She does all our food pantry stuff. So it really is a community at work here. And so that's the biggest part of it. They also donated for the therapy dogs. So a school by itself can't do all these things, but when you get partnerships like we have with different places, Aspirus and Portage and different hospitals in our area and different people, we're able to do a lot of cool things.
Yeah. I find it really powerful too, just, to give you credit too, it's kind of hard to change your approach, especially, I imagine you were talking about being, a strict disciplinarian. That was probably a habit you had for a long time, as an educator before you ever got there. And so that flexibility to say, the teacher coming up to you and saying, "Hey, this isn't working." I imagine that was kind of hard to shift, but, you did it. You had a growth mindset and you said, "Okay, well, thank you." And maybe you didn't say that at the time. Who knows?
Well, no, I did. I guess I'm a little probably different, as my door is open, and we do have rounding with teachers, and they're allowed to come in and tell me, "Hey, this is working, this isn't working." And it's just like one of those things that you have to work with your teachers, you have to work with your parents, you have to work with your superintendent, and we're very fortunate here at Calumet. We have just awesome teachers and awesome parents, and a great board that allows us to do these things. But yeah, I 12, 13 years in a different school working, and that was my job as disciplinarian and special ed teacher. So, I kind of followed that path. And when I was told it wasn't working, I had to stop and think what's going to happen. And they guided me. I mean, those Meg North and Troy Jarvie and Luke Tyson and Keith Johnson. I don't want to forget any of their names, because they helped make sure that I was on the right path as a principal, and they shaped what we're doing today. So they were just unreal, and following their lead, it was so easy.
I want to ask you, do you remember like a moment that you like fell in love with education and like just knew that you wanted to go into education? It could have been before you entered the profession, or it could have been one of those like moments where it just like clicked and you realized, yep, this is it for me.
No, I kind of ended up, I kind of laugh as I ended up here by accident, and a lot of little accidents on the way. I fell into education because I actually dropped out of college. I didn't know what I was going to do. And the old superintendent of my school, Pat Rosage, called me up and said, "Hey, I heard you're free. You have some free time in your hands. Can you come in and work as a substitute teacher?" I said, "Yeah, no problem at all." So I started substitute teaching and working with kids with disabilities. And I fell in love with it. So I went back to college and I started doing, I went for social studies and PE. And then I ended up getting a job in special education by accident, by a full-time sub job. So I went and got my master's in special education. And as I was working in special education, our superintendent got sick and our principal was sick. So they were out of the building. They asked me to do discipline. So I kind of accidentally ended up in the discipline role. And then somehow I ended up Horizons, and now I'm sitting here. So, I think I've always loved working with kids. I've always loved working with kids that have challenges. It's kind of, that's where my passion lies, and education provides that, I guess. So there's no real time. It's just kind of a path that just accidentally keep falling into the right spots, I guess.
I almost in a way like that story better than, I knew I was going to be a teacher from the age I was, 5, like, because I don't know. It's like it's almost more magical that you like just fell into it and somebody was like, "Hey, you want a sub?" And you're like, "Sure." And then you realize you loved it. That's kind of serendipitous and magical.
And I, right away, like you say, I knew when I was going to be, you hear that a lot. I knew I was going to be a teacher since 5th grade, but I struggled in school. At the beginning, I had some great teachers, Priscilla Chenoweth, who helped me with reading, and Sherry Norman, who really spent a lot of time with me when I was younger in 5th and 6th grade, and Jim Lang, who was our principal, and Mike Benda, some of those teachers that really just did a lot for me and kind of helped me through. So it was more of a struggle. So I would have never saw myself as a educator as a young individual. I mean, as we got older, you understand what's going on, and you understand passion, and you understand, going to something you love. Obviously things change, but no, I had some great teachers along the way. But yeah, I would have never said in 5th grade or 6th grade. I don't think any of my teachers would have said, even in 11th and 12th grade, this guy is going to be an educator or administrator. So lots of accidents.
I must imagine that would give you like a different perspective and some empathy, especially in, working in an alternative setting, now working in middle school. Like, if you can remember being a kid that struggled, that maybe being able to empathize with kids that struggle. What do you?
Yeah, it gives you a different view, right? When you understand that kid that really does want to do well and impress their parents or impress their friends. Remember, when you're teaching these students, a lot of times we forget that they're demonstrating their ability in front of their peers over and over and over. So you're looking at self-efficacy and self-esteem and how that's related. And especially if you're a struggling student, you kind of lose passion. You lose belief in yourself when you struggle, because your peers see it every single day. And so that's a struggle. I think understanding that has really helped. I think seeing that has really helped, but you see it in students all the time. And you kind of see them around this middle school age where they start to give up a little bit. And so that's why I'm really excited to be at this middle school, because I think being able to reach those kids that have struggled a little bit it's the feeling is unbelievable when you can get them to that point where they love being here, or they don't know why, they just love being here, and they start showing up more and more. And so our teachers focus on that here in the middle school, and it's absolutely amazing to see what they do. Our 6th grade teams and 7th and 8th grade teams, just absolutely amazing what they do with those students that struggle and start getting their participation up and getting their attendance up and getting discipline referrals down just by that communicating and finding what they love to do and then working with it.
It really, demonstrates both anecdotally, and I imagine there's plenty of research to back this up, student engagement and engaging student interest, right? But just proves the efficacy of that model just even those examples of, a student who went from wanting nothing to do with this to, like you said, the kid with the motorbike,
Yeah.
who hasn't missed a day. Like
Yep.
it's just also, I imagine, like showing that you care, right? Even the food pantry and all these different examples. It's like, hey, it shows with your actions as an educator and as a school that you care about them.
Yeah. And we went down this Capturing Kids' Hearts path, and Vern Hazard, and I always put a little plug in for Vern because he's done so much for me as an individual and for us as a school. But we have teachers in the hallway. So imagine if you're a student coming into a building and no one's there. You just walk in, you go to your locker, put your stuff, throw your stuff in, walk to the lunchroom. No one really greets you. No one really says, "Hey, how you doing?" You go to class, and at the end of the day, you walk out. For those kids that struggle, they feel invisible. Now, if you turn that around and you say, at the door, you have a wagging dog, a tail wagging from a dog, right, ready to see you, ready to start your day off, and teachers in the hallway giving you a high five or fist bumps. Now, I guess it's COVID, so you're not supposed to do a bunch of stuff, but elbow bumps, yeah. So you can do all kinds of different stuff. Imagine how that changes your feeling about school, and that's what I think our teachers here at Calumet have done so well at. They allow the dogs to come in class. We have a teacher right next door that has treats for them, and the dogs walk in and out, and Blue and Tucker walk in and out, and Bailey. And the students really grow with that. And like I said, if you come into a school where it feels cold, you're not going to get a lot of participation on your kids. Of course, your top end kids are going to be your top end kids, and they're going to do well with or without us. They're going to do better with us. But your middle kids and your kids on the bottom are struggling really need that. And so even your top end kids need it. But some of those kids need it a little bit more, and they'll show up more for you, and they'll work harder for you. If hey, how was your day? How was your weekend? Oh, I heard you caught a nice fish. Or it doesn't have to be about education. It shouldn't be about education. It should be, I saw you scored 10 points at your basketball game, or I saw you had a nice defensive thing, or hey, you got first chair in band, or you did really good in choir, or something outside, right? To make that connection. And our teachers here do a phenomenal job at that. And that's thanks to Capturing Kids' Hearts and the path we've been down there, thanks to Darren Kinnanen and Carmen Markham and a few others that really worked hard to make sure these programs got here.
I'm Nikki Herda, and you're listening to Bright, stories of hope and innovation in Michigan classrooms. Bright is brought to you in part by MEMIC Insurance Company, ensuring the educational community for more than 70 years. Teachers and school employees visit memic.com/quote to see how much you can save. Today, I'm chatting with Joel Asiala, principal of Washington Middle School in Michigan's northernmost school district. Up next, we dive into how and why Joel got his family pet Tucker trained as a therapy dog, what a day in the life of a therapy dog actually looks like, and of course, Joel's top 3 tips for starting a therapy dog program at your school. So today we're going to be talking about 3 tips for bringing therapy dogs into your school. I do want to unpack the why a little bit. I think we've gotten hints of it for sure with the stories that you were talking about with bringing, I think you said it was Tucker first that came into the classroom and sat with a kid in the back and just, really kind of brought him out of his shell a little bit, or her. I was curious if you would just let me know, like, what first motivated you to bring Tucker as your family dog, right?
Yeah, he's our family dog, correct.
So what first, sparked this idea? What got you to bring Tucker into your school at Horizons?
So once again, it was an accident. So Meg North was a teacher up at Horizon, or is a teacher up at our alternative school, and she had a dog called Sweet Pea. And Sweet Pea would come into school, and it was actually a trained therapy dog. And I didn't know this, but when I came in and got the job, the Sweet Pea had passed away. And so I saw pictures. I'm like, well, that looks just like my dog. And she's like, well, why don't you bring your dog in? I'm like, I'm not bringing that dog to school. That's crazy. No. And she hounded me a little bit here and there. And so finally I brought him in, and I was amazed. It was just amazed that the kids are laying on the floor with them and petting him, and he's laying on the floor, and he loves to be pet, right? And so I started bringing him more and more, and then Aspirus Keweenaw, our local hospital, that's where my wife works, they had a presentation about therapy dogs. They want to bring therapy dogs in the hospital. My wife says, well, we have a dog that goes to the school every day. He can come to the hospital, and they said he had to get trained. So Kim Piaget, who works for the hospital, said that she would go get him trained through Pet Partners. And so she got him trained as a therapy dog through Pet Partners. And yeah, the rest is history. He now goes to the hospitals on weekends. He goes to Michigan Tech University during exam times, and he comes to school almost daily with us. And so that's how it kind of got started. It's amazing when you see a kid that's having a bad day, when the dog comes up to him, sits down, and you just see those frustrations kind of melt away, and they're on the floor with the dog and rolling with the dog. And I'll tell you, it's not only the students, it's staff. Our teachers, a dog will come in and they'll start talking, they'll start petting the dog. And even in my office, the dog will be sitting here, and it makes a lot of conversations a lot easier. I don't know all the research. I'm not a dog research person. I don't do all the research. I'm not a dog trainer. I just know that it works, and it's amazing to see. So I can't give you the research on why or how or anything like that. I just know it works. And it's pretty amazing to see. So that's how he got started. And then now we brought Blue in. It's kind of the same way, where we actually bought Blue. And our secretary at the middle school is his handler. So it's a family dog, and they bring Blue in as well. And same thing with the elementary school.
What kind of dog is Tucker?
Labradoodles. So golden doodle and Labradoodle. So that hypoallergenic part, I'm actually really allergic to dogs. And all kinds of different animals.
I was wondering that too, yeah, if there was any issues with that.
Yeah, so me and my son are allergic to animals. Actually, if he does not bathe every couple of weeks, my allergies kick up. So we know when we have to make sure he's bathed and taken care of. But have that hypoallergenic part of it is very, very important, because some kids are really, really allergic to fur or the oils of fur. So that's why we chose the Labradoodle and the golden doodles.
What does a day in the life look like for a therapy dog at school?
A lot of just sitting there and get pet. He in the beginning, it's kind of neat to see. I guess he's been trained, and you kind of take it for granted. But in the beginning of the day, in the morning, he's always in the hallways roaming around, because there's kids walking in. So he goes from door to door to door, looking for kids that'll pay attention to him. And they'll pet him. If a kid doesn't want to pay attention, they keep walking, and he just goes find somebody else. And then he'll come sit in my office. Once the bell rings, he'll come sit in my office, and he'll get up once in a while when he hears some commotion, and he'll go into a classroom here or there. Or if I go for a walk, he'll come with me into the classrooms. He'll sit down. But as soon as that bell rings, boom, he's up. He's in the hallway. He's walking around, checking things out. So that's what he basically does on a daily basis. If a student comes into the office because they've been removed from class for some reason, whatever the reason being, he'll go spend time with that child, because just loves being pet, and Blue will do the same thing, and Bailey does the same thing. So basically they roam around and look to be pet. That's kind of their day. That's what they love to do. And that's kind of what.
Pretty nice day, actually.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Cool. So he kind of like sets his own schedule, if you will, besides maybe being trained with the bell or by choice or otherwise.
Yeah. And
he doesn't have like it's not like, oh, he goes to this classroom at this time. And this
No. We, if a teacher's having a tough day and they know they're gonna have a tough day, or they have some things going on in the class, they'll take them up to class. And my son goes to school here too. So he'll roam out and find my son and kind of hang out with my son for the day here. That's and cool. There. But yeah, so he gets his dog at school. He's spoiled.
Yes. All right. Shall we dig into our 3 strategies that you have to offer us? Or really, if you imagine an educator, an administrator who's interested in maybe getting started with bringing a therapy dog to school, but just doesn't really know where to start. Like, what pieces of advice would you give them? And I'll turn it over to you to start with just number 1, your first piece of advice.
I get asked this a lot, especially now, because obviously, so a lot of our local schools are moving towards this. I'm not a dog expert. I'm not an expert in the area of therapy dogs. My first bit of advice is you need to find a dog that is really motivated by being pet or being loved, and that is really laid back, doesn't want to jump, is not aggressive, doesn't bark. Those are things that you got to find. Finding a puppy and training a puppy, it's going to take you a year and a half to do this. So you're better off looking for a dog that a staff member has that is just a really good dog, and understand that a dog person is going to love their dog. And so you have to be able to see what they're like in class. You have to make that determination. And that's tough too, because a lot of people treat their dog, it's their family. So that's always a tough thing to do. But your first thing to look at his dog is, I wouldn't go down and call it a therapy dog. I'd call it a school pet, and get him trained in obedience, because that's the easiest thing to do, is get the dog obedience trained. Once you have the dog obedience trained, you can then go for the pet therapy. But a therapy dog is only going to work about 2 hours a day. So the other times you can have the dog as just the school pet, where they're roaming around and not doing therapy per se, but they're just being a pet, just being there, right? And so Tucker, we make sure that you don't want to say overworked, right? So if he's going to spend time with a student that's struggling, we'll have them with that person, but not for over about 30, 40 minutes, because it is taxing on a dog. And so we want to make sure that they have that ability to play as well. So that's the first piece of advice. Find a dog that suits you, suits your school, is very laid back, and just look at it as a school pet, and then do the obedience training. And then look at the therapy part of it, because the therapy training there's a lot of work involved in it.
I can imagine. And that's helpful to hear too, that, you can get a puppy and train them from a young age, but in a way it's probably better to have one with a personal connection, a dog with a personal connection to the school, and that just has that right, temperament for the job, because then, kind of like with humans, right? You can get training to do the skills, but, it's got to be
natural. And it's just got to be natural. And that's why it's so hard to say, I'm going to get this puppy. Remember, you train puppies and they get to be a year or year and a half old, and they'll say, okay, this puppy isn't going to work, because it just doesn't have the demeanor, or it doesn't have that. And you're not going to force that on a dog. Remember, you're working with children, so you're not going to force that on a dog. So right. The easiest would be to find a dog that has that right temperament, that is hypoallergenic, and kind of ready to go, and slowly introduce them. Because remember, you have 150 kids, 200 kids, or even 60 or 70 kids running around. That dog is going to get overwhelmed very quickly. And so just slow introductions. And once they get going, like Tucker will be surrounded by 15 or 20, even 30 kindergartners at one time, and he'll just lay down and roll around. And when he's done, he walks off, right? So there's a lot of logistical things you got to look at when you're looking at a therapy dog or a school pet per se.
All right. How about your second tip for us?
Second tip would be, the dog should be with somebody that is going to be around the school a lot. I'm around the school quite a bit. I walk around in classrooms. So Tucker comes with me a lot. And so he's used to roaming the school and getting in the classrooms and seeing classrooms. So you want somebody that's willing to walk the dog around a lot on their prep hours. Maybe you have a teacher that has 2 prep hours and they're willing to do that. It takes a lot of time. And it takes someone that is committed and someone that really wants to be with a dog and believes in what it can do for the school. So you have to find that person. Finding the dog is very important, but finding the person is almost as important, or if not more important. Someone that's going to spend the time, because they're with this dog all the time, and it's a constant training. You constantly look at their behaviors. If they start jumping, you got to correct that behavior. So finding that right person is going to be very, very important. Just as important as finding the right dog.
Yeah. And so it probably helps, right? Like Tucker is your dog. And then you said her secretary, I think, at Washington, was Blue already her dog, or did you?
No. So Blue? Yeah, Nora D. So we have a trauma team here that we meet on a regular basis and look at our trauma and how it's going in school and what we're, what are our levels and how kids are doing. And during that process, once we figured out we wanted to go down the therapy dog route, we actually asked people to submit applications to where we could buy them a dog, and Nora D did that. And so she's able to walk the dog around and take the dog out and make sure that the dog's here every day. We have a little bed for Blue. I want to say the dog, I guess, but for Blue in the corner, and there's a bed in the social worker's office, and there's a bed upstairs. So yeah, that was the process. We had people that were really interested in it, and so that it just worked out. And Blue is an amazing dog as well, and so we have and they're both big dogs. They're both bigger dogs. And then we have Bailey, who's a teddy bear, so it's a little tiny dog. And I brought her here one time, and this is the third part. You have to have patience. The dog is a dog. It will go bathroom on the floor. It's not always going to do what you tell it to do. It's an animal, so you have to have patience, and that's the last big part, is understand that you're going to have to clean up after the dog here and there. You're going to have to make sure there's food, there's water. You have the patience, you have the time to do that. You're also going to have to spend time before school and after school training that dog. So having the patience is probably the third biggest thing, and understanding that everything isn't going to go as you planned or you thought, and then understand that you have to bring the dog. You have to find that person that's going to bring them every day. Now, Tucker isn't here today because I have a meeting after school, and then I have to go to another board meeting, and so I'm not going to get home till 9:00 tonight, and that's not fair to my dog. To have him here till 9. Now, he would probably love it. He would probably roam around and go to the board meeting and do all kinds of stuff, but so having that understanding that, it's a lot of time, and understand the person has to understand you can't always bring the dog. The dog's not always going to be here. And that's we're very fortunate to have two dogs. So Blue is here today. So.
Yeah. And I imagine that goes hand in hand with the person, right? Making sure it's a person. Because I imagine whoever the dog's person is mostly responsible for like the feeding and the breaks and everything too. So
yeah. And that's a big thing, right? Is Blue is leash trained, where Tucker is leash trained, but also doesn't need a leash. So outside, I can let Blue outside, or Tucker outside, or any student can let Tucker outside, and he'll listen every time and come back every time. Blue is leash trained, so you have to go out there with the leash on and bring him out there. So those are little things that you have to think about as you're going, especially if you're going to be in an urban area. You have to find a place where that dog can go bathroom, who's going to pick it up. All those types of things. So there's a lot of little things that people don't think about. It's like the Christmas morning, I'm going to get my kid a dog, and then kind of thinking 3 years down the road, how is this going to work out? So a lot of those little things, but it's all worth it, because when you see the kids and the interaction, it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that transitions nicely. I've got a couple last questions for you. So can you tell us about a time when you witnessed a therapy dog have a profound effect on a student's life?
I guess I don't have a really telling story. It's just a bunch of little stories, or a bunch of little observations over time. When kids are having a bad day, or when a student is crying, or something's going on at home, when Tucker or Blue come lay with them, it's one of those things where you see it and you don't really understand it, and then you look at the child and they're petting the dog, and pretty soon that's all they're thinking about is the dog. And it's just amazing to see, and you see it over and over, and it's not something that I'm going to tell you that, oh my goodness, it changed this person's world or life, and that's not what you're looking for. I mean, it would be great if it happened, but realistically, it's 1,000 little things that you see every day. Even if a kid just walks by and hey, Tucker gives him a little pet on the head, or hey, give me a high five, Tucker, or Blue, or so those are little things that that they're just engaged with the dog, and they're engaged with what's going on in the school, and you're helping them by just having that dog there. And those are the 1,000 little things you see over and over. We did have one incident where I'm a basketball coach, or I was a basketball coach. Now I have too much going on, so I had to walk away from it. But we had a student that was having a mini seizure. And we knew the student, there was a medical issue, right? We understood what was going on. And so she was sitting there, and she knows when she's about to go into a seizure. And Tucker, all of a sudden, he was by me in practice, and all of a sudden he was gone. And I didn't know what was going on at the time. And Tucker's laying down on this girl's lap, and she's petting the dog, and, kind of slowly, kind of going in and out a little bit. And my assistant coach is sitting right next to her, crying. So I stopped practice, went over, and what's going on? She goes, "This dog is absolutely amazing." I said, "Well, what's going on?" And she told me what was going on, that, we had an issue. So I'm like, "Oh, we got to call. We got to, I'm in full panic mode now, They said, "No, we know what's going on. We have understood. I already called. I texted the mom. The mom's coming." And then Tucker stayed with this individual until the mom got there. So it was pretty amazing to see. Was it life-changing? No, but it was amazing to see what that dog could do, and keeping that student calm. I don't know the research behind it. I just know that it was amazing to see.
Yeah. And I have to imagine, 1,000 little things add up over time, right? And even paired with all the other programs you're doing to, capture kids' hearts, student first, those things all together, I imagine, can really transform a student's life, because, even if all it does is keep them actually interested in education, it keeps them, feeling like somebody cares about them. Like, long term, the effects of that certainly can. So,
yeah, and I want, we talked about horizons right at the beginning. We had 7, 8, 9 kids graduating, and we're up to 20 to 22 kids graduating, and it's amazing staff out there. It's amazing stuff. But all that stuff they did, all the stuff the students did, and the teachers did up there, and that student first approach, the dog, the flex labs, the maker spaces, the food pantry, all played into it, and it was a huge part of it. And so bringing that down to this main campus is another big part of it. And we have teachers that are really excited to do it. And just looking at how we can reach kids, I think that's the biggest thing. And just being able to say that the academics is actually the easiest part of teaching. Standing up there and teaching is the easiest part of teaching. A lot of people forget that you do a lot more as a teacher than just give them A squared plus B squared equals C squared. It's the personal connections. It's the motivation. It's the, up all night trying to figure out how to reach this kid in a different way, or changing something up. Do they need the special education, or do they need extra time, or, all those little things that really make you as a teacher. And then going beyond that and say, how can we help the student, even further? Can we get a food pantry here? If a kid's starving at night, they're not interested in school. If a kid's going through something at home, they're not interested in school. I mean, if I get in a fight with my wife at home, which I never do because she's always right, I know that. But if I ever did, coming to school would be very difficult the next day. I would be crabby. I'd be irritated. I'm not going to be as open. I'm not going to want to do as much work. So the same is for a student. A student has a fight with a parent at home, or a fight with someone at home, or something's going on at home that we don't understand. We're never going to reach that child. We're never going to teach them math that day, or that week, or that month, or that year. And that's why we end up with gaps. And so being able to reach them, I'm not saying that's a be all end all, but it's definitely a start, and it's definitely heading in the right direction. And we've been so fortunate to have teachers here that understand that, and went through the capturing kids' hearts, and reaching the kid, capture their hearts, you'll capture their minds. And Flip says that over and over and over. And our elementary principals say it over and over. Julie Giacchino and Matt Hampton are constantly on me about all these little things. And they've been unbelievable champions for us. They're actually a Capturing Kids lead school. So they're recognized nationwide. But going over those things with all the other stuff, the therapy dogs and the food pantries, and that is just a big part of a great community and a great school district that I'm very fortunate to work with.
Yeah, it really sounds like, it truly does. It's a community effort. You've listed so many names and so many different people and partnerships that have helped out. So that's really cool to see. You have time for one last question?
Yeah, you can ask questions all day.
Well, I would, but we'll keep it to one more. So can you tell me about a teacher who has had a positive impact on your life? And I know it can be hard to just pick one, but it doesn't have to be your favorite. We can acknowledge that so many people have contributed, but just someone, who's you could describe their characteristics and the effect that they had on your life.
And there were so many. I grew up in this area. I went to school just down the road at Jeffers High School, Adam Township Schools. And there are a lot of teachers that I would look up to and still look up to today and still talk to today. But Priscilla Schnauwith is probably the one teacher that I have to thank her for just about everything I have. She spent a lot of time working with a struggling student, working with a boy that didn't really know how to read that well, struggled with wanting to be at school, struggled with maybe even how to deal with some of the things they were going through. And she spent a lot of time working with me, teaching me how to read. And she showed me that patience, understanding, and just wanting to be that person to help a student is so worth it. She is just an amazing individual, and like I said, there's a lot more. We have Sherry Norman and Jim Lang and Mike Benda. And Mike Benda was he was a science teacher, and I still don't like science to this day. But Mr. Benda was just an absolutely amazing person, because he showed all of us what it was like just to be in touch with students, just to be there for students, and just to be with students and talk to them on a student level. And so he taught me a lot about just student relationships, and I still see him to this day and talk to him for a long time and see how he's doing. He's retired. All these people are retired now. I'm getting old. But you see a lot of educators in this area that just put everything they have into their teaching. And I have a lot in my building, and it's just amazing to see when they do their job, how great people end up. And so I'm so thankful to see that and have teachers like that.
Without a doubt, it's challenging work to capture kids' hearts and bring passion, engagement, and empathy into learning at all levels. But with leaders like Joel and Tucker and Blue and Bailey forging our path forward, if there's one thing we're certain of, it's that the future is bright. You can find our full report on student-centered learning in action in the CLK School District at michiganvirtual.org/research. If you know someone who's an inspiring Michigan educator who should be featured on our show, send us an email at bright@michiganvirtual.org to let us know who they are and why we should interview them. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Bright, Stories of Hope and Innovation in Michigan Classrooms. This podcast is produced by Herbie Gaylord, is hosted by me, Nikki Herda, and is shaped by many of our passionate and talented colleagues. Big thanks to Krista Green, Holly Boleski, Terrence Wilkerson, Anna Boyer, Sarah Hill, and Brandon Batista for their contributions to this episode. Bright is brought to you in part by Mimic Insurance Company, ensuring the educational community for more than 70 years. Teachers and school employees visit mimic.com/quote to see how much you can save. The Bright podcast is made possible by Michigan Virtual, a nonprofit organization that's leading and collaborating to build learning environments for tomorrow. Education is changing faster than ever. Discover new models and resources to move learning forward at your school at michiganvirtual.org.